Federico Vitici. We are back with another episode of App Stories, this week sponsored by Memberful and Technology Untangled. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing really well. Thank you. I've been spending some time, relaxing and taking things a little bit easier than usual, but also I'm also busy and we are preparing for a big reveal or big launch, which we've been teasing. We've been sharing some very secretive details about that, and more
Right.
will be revealed very soon. All I can say is that very, very soon, by the time you're listening this, we will be making announcements. We will be making maybe before the main announcement, like a pre-announcement. I don't know. Maybe we'll do things a little bit differently. We like to surprise people. And so stay tuned.
Yeah, keep them off kilter a little bit.
Yeah, stay tuned because we have a lot to announce.
Yeah,
It's
we
a lot.
really do. We really do. And we've been, most of our planning recently has been how to really roll that out in a way
Yeah.
that is simple. And you've been teasing things. I like it when you do your teases. It's funny because a lot of the things that people are discovering just now are things that if you really pay attention to our screenshots and stories for going all the way back to, I think, December of last year, there are hints in places in those screenshots. I mean, they're very obscure hints, but they are there because this is not a project that was started last week. This has been going on for
Oh
months
yeah.
now.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah.
You know what? Why don't we dive into our topic today? And I know this is a topic that we haven't really talked about on the show, I don't think, before, and that's side-loading apps. But it's obviously a topic that has a lot of current relevance with all of the controversies about Apple's App Store and how to deal with deal with the walled garden and whether there should be anything done or what should be done. And actually, just this past last week, the U.S. Senate introduced a bill that would require app stores, not just Apple's but also Google's, to permit both side loading of apps and third-party payment systems. Those are two of the main issues that are kind of at stake in the Epic lawsuit that we wrote about earlier in the year, and also one of the big topics that have been that's been discussed a lot when regulators have been looking at Apple and Google and other stores. So we thought we'd talk a little bit about side loading today because I know you've been experimenting with some things, and I have too, on and off for several months, and get a sense for what's available out there and what you can do.
Yeah, it's been fun to dig into this for the past couple of weeks, and I don't want to talk about the politics side of it. Honestly, I think that's pretty boring, and we've talked about it on Connected, on App Stories, on other shows before. I just want to talk about the actual thing, the actual side loading thing. And really, when it comes to side loading, I feel like these days it really comes down to a product, which is AltStore. So we have mentioned AltStore on Mac stories and app stories before, but we never really dug into it that well. And that's what I've been doing over the past couple of weeks. So it all started, I'm pretty sure I told this story on Connected when I was with Mike a couple of weeks ago. So it all started because I wanted to play an old Metroid game for the Game Boy Advance. So without having to repeat that story, I like to keep original games and original hardware for all of my old Nintendo games and consoles. And so my first thought was that I was going to play my Metroid Zero Mission GBA cartridge on an actual GBA. But because I'm getting older and my hands are not what they used to be, long story short, all old Nintendo consoles, which are very small, are not good for my hands.
Yeah.
And so after trying a variety of different hardware, I reached the conclusion that I just needed to play this game with an emulator on my iPhone using an external controller that would not destroy my hands. And so that led me down the path of, okay, I need to install AltStore.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Memberful. Monetize your passion with membership. Memberful allows you to build sustainable, recurring revenue. It's the easiest way to sell memberships to your audience, and it's used by the biggest creators on the web. Memberful has everything you need to get started running a membership program, including custom branding, gift subscriptions, Apple Pay, free trials, private podcasts, and a whole lot more. On top of that, Memberful seamlessly integrates with the tools you already use, and you have full control and ownership over your audience, your brand, and your membership. Memberful has a world-class support team too, who's ready to help you simplify your memberships and grow your revenue. They're passionate about your success, and you'll always have access to a real human. We've used Memberful for years for Club Mac stories, and we love it. We're in control of the relationship with our members. It makes payment simple for customers, and it supports everything we've ever wanted to offer club members and a whole lot more. I don't know any other service that could handle everything we do so well. Get started with a free, no credit card required trial at memberful.com/appstories. Again, to get started with your membership program, go to memberful.com/appstories so they know you came from the show. Our thanks to Memberful for their support of App Stories.
So AltStore is, let's cut to the main point here. A lot of people use it to pirate games and apps.
Right.
And I don't think that's cool. I don't think it's, we're obviously against that idea of using sideloading to, not purchase games and apps from the App Store. Honestly, that's not cool. But unfortunately, as with anything that allows you to sideload software on your computer, those people exist. And those people do that. They're usually, judging from what you see on Reddit, what you see on Discord servers, they're usually kids, right? That maybe don't have credit cards to purchase stuff on the App Store. I see these kids all the time getting into silly arguments with one another on Reddit. You can tell they're very young kids, but still, the problem exists, and it needs to be acknowledged. But thankfully, there's a more beautiful and interesting side to sideloading, which is installing apps that sort of hit this kind of gray area, right? Software that Apple doesn't allow on the App Store. And that includes game emulators. It includes PC and Linux emulators. So, virtual machines, for example.
Right.
And it includes, in the case of AltStore, a popular category of apps that you can find is tweaked versions of popular apps. These are usually called things like YouTube++ or Instagram++. And these are like modified versions of those apps that have additional features or some UI changes, like additional options that they're not available in the official apps that you get from the App Store. Now, obviously, my big focus here has been video games and emulators and playing all the Nintendo games. I haven't spent a lot of time playing with actual apps. I know that a lot of people use the clipboard manager that is available in AltStore. I know that a lot of people install those tweaked versions of apps. I have installed one which is called UU, which would be like a tweaked version of YouTube that enables picture-in-picture and offline downloads done in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
But, those tweaked apps, because you're effectively downloading a binary of an app that has been modified and recompiled, it's a little bit sketchy as a thing to do. Sure, there's verified developers and there's an entire community on Discord of users who poke into those apps and actually verify that, that developer, they have added this and this feature to the app, but it's still it's a little bit odd as a thing to do. But I think emulators are the big reason why a lot of people get into sideloading. And getting into sideloading with AltStore is unfortunately a bit involved. Now, I don't want this episode to be like a tutorial on how to install AltStore. Also because there's excellent documentation on the AltStore website. But I would say my general tip here is that obviously you're going to need a computer. You're going to need a Mac to set up AltStore on your iPhone or iPad. Once you install AltStore, it's like its own app store where you can find apps to download, but you can also add additional sources. It's kind of like Cydia, if you remember Cydia back from the jailbreak days.
Right, it's a lot like that, yeah.
You add sources and you can find apps from those sources. The thing about AltStore is that in order to install or update apps on your iPhone or iPad, you need to be running this utility called AltServer on your Mac. And AltServer, in order to work, uses a workaround. Requires two things: a developer account. It can be a free account or it can be a paid developer account from apple.com. And it requires that you install a plugin in the Apple Mail app and that you leave the app running in order for AltServer to verify the apps that it installs on AltStore on your iOS or iPadOS device.
Right, because essentially what AltStore is doing, what AltServer is doing, is it's taking advantage of an aspect of the developer accounts that allow for side loading wirelessly to devices, as I understand it, and that Mail plugin is what is bridging between the Xcode features and the actual AltServer and the AltStore app on your iPhone.
Yeah, exactly. What I did is, so I used to have like a separate free developer account just for AltStore. If you use a free account, you're limited to 7 days of usage, meaning every 7 days, those apps have to be refreshed. So you need to connect your iPhone to your computer, either via Wi-Fi or USB. You need to open Mail, and you need to let AltServer re-verify those apps that expire after 7 days. That's because with a free developer account, your sign-in profile only lasts for 7 days. However, as of a few weeks ago, I went ahead and I purchased a secondary Apple developer membership program for my secondary Apple developer account. So now in AltStore, all my apps last up to a year, which is much better. So I don't have to worry about connecting, to my computer every 7 days to refresh them.
That's nice. I've had some problems with that myself personally. I don't know if it's a bug or what.
It's a bit involved. But that said, when you want to update those apps, because a new version is out, you still need to connect to a computer, because updating is like installing the app from scratch. So, but at the very least, like now you don't have to worry every 7 days to do that if you have a paid up developer account.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Technology Untangled. One of my favorite things is finding a new podcast to listen to. Maybe you're new to App Stories and you've had that experience recently too. Well, I've got a new show for you to try called Technology Untangled. It's hosted by Michael Bird, and it's a show that deciphers tech's rapid evolutions with one simple question in mind. What's really going to shape our future? And what's going to end up on the bargain bin with the floppy disk? I've listened to a couple of different episodes recently, and I really like them. The first was all about quantum computing. I've read a lot about this subject, but oftentimes articles gloss over the details and do a hand-wavy thing explaining what quantum computing is. With Technology Untangled, I feel like I have a much better handle on the entire subject. It was explained clearly and concisely. The same goes for blockchain. I listened to an episode about that, and it was a great overview and explanation on how it all works. If you love to learn and understand today's technology, this is the podcast for you. The show has covered a ton of different topics, things like 5G and what it means to you, supercomputers and how they're helping us with the fight against COVID, along with things like AI and the future of jobs, and even episodes on energy innovation and the mission to Mars. There's lots of choices. The show has lots of great guests, too, including people from Google, Sainsbury's, Aston Martin, Red Bull Racing, Goodhilly Earth Station, the New York Times, Nokia, and more. Michael Bird has interviewed over 50 super interesting people this year. Think technologists, scientists, academics, developers, futurists, and IT generalists. And in the final episode of Technology Untangled, you can hear about the one innovation almost all of the guests couldn't stop talking about, as well as learning how to prepare for tomorrow's innovations today. Search for Technology Untangled anywhere you listen to podcasts. I'll include a link in the show notes, too. Our thanks to Technology Untangled for their support of the show.
So the big reason why people sideload, I think, is to have emulators of old video game consoles on the iPhone and iPad. Riley Tested, the creator of AltStore, also is the creator of the Delta emulator. So Delta is an incredible emulator for all Nintendo consoles. So the NES, SNES, N64, Nintendo DS, Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance. Basically everything excluding the GameCube, Wii, Wii U, and 3DS and Switch, right?
Right.
So essentially all of the 2D consoles and the Nintendo DS, which is a pretty incredible accomplishment. There's other emulators on available via AltStore. There's the excellent Provenance. Provenance is another popular emulator that now has an official AltStore source. Used to be that you needed to compile Provenance yourself using Xcode. But if you use AltStore, you can just download it from the official source. And Provenance, in addition to Nintendo consoles, supports Sega consoles, Atari, and a bunch of others. There's another incredible emulator that is really well done, and that I'm going to spend some time digging into this more. PPS SPP, which is a funny name, but
I don't know that one.
It's a PSP emulator, and it's really well done. Right. What I love about this one is that it lets you upscale the graphics of PSP games. So you can play a PSP game, and it looks incredibly shiny. Like you can upscale it 4 times or 5 times, and it looks kind of like 4K on an eye. It looks really pretty, I can tell you that. There's Dolphin. Dolphin iOS is the iPhone and iPad version of the popular Dolphin emulator for the GameCube. Unfortunately, right now, Dolphin is not working on iOS 15. The Dolphin iOS beta is working, but you need to enable JIT. JIT would be just-in-time compilation. It's a whole thing. Used to be available before. Now it's not available anymore. Riley is working on a workaround, but the folks at Dolphin will have to adopt that new framework. So, all this to say, I think most people installing AltStore will probably check out Delta, Provenance, and PPS-PP, which is, the PSP emulator. I think these are the big 3 that you should look into if you install AltStore.
Yeah, they are. And it is worth emphasizing that, as you just described, it is a little involved getting this going. I mean, you have to really want to do it. And it does break from time to time because this is side loading. It's not officially sanctioned in any way. So, especially if you're like you and me and we're on betas all the time, betas have a way of breaking this stuff pretty regularly. And I'll dive into Delta for a while, and then it's broken, and I just kind of leave it alone for a while until things stabilize again, and then I go back to it. I mean, as an aside, I really wish that Nintendo, for instance, would do something about this. Yeah. I was thinking what I would really like to see, Federico, big picture, is an industry group across like Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo, where they create like a joint venture that they fund, that's sole purpose is to create the best possible emulators for all the old systems up to, say, I don't know, 15 years ago or something like that, and then make those available. And then they could do like some sort of paid overlay for that, where there might be these games are there and they're preserved as kind of a historical function, but they can then maybe package them with their systems and make it really convenient for people who don't want to use some other install emulators and do things like that. I mean, in an ideal world, that would be fantastic. I've been trying a lot of different ways to play classic games. I've ordered an Analog Pocket, which uses the original hardware with modern hardware, which I'm looking forward to eventually getting this fall, but still don't have. And I've tried a bunch of other devices and options, but a lot of times you're right that something like Delta is fantastic and it works really well when it's working with whatever betas we happen to be on. But it's a shame because I just as soon give Nintendo my money. If I'm buying old cartridges from a used cartridge seller online, or if I'm downloading an emulator, neither of those situations Nintendo gets any of my money.
Yep.
And so it seems like to me like there's a business solution here that would be a lot better for all of these game companies, because all I want to do is kind of play these classic games in the way they were intended to be played originally, and on hardware that's more modern than, say, like you said, an old Game Boy Advance isn't a lot of fun to play on in 2021.
No, not anymore. But honestly, the solution is what Microsoft is doing with Xbox, which is incredible. Yes. What they're doing with backwards compatibility. We have an episode of Remaster, my video game show on Relay FM, all about backwards compatibility and what Microsoft is doing, which is incredible. Mm-hmm. The fact that you can play an original Xbox game from 20 years ago in 4K 60 frames on an Xbox Series S or X in 2021, it's just mind-boggling, honestly. Like, it's incredible what Microsoft has been doing, and Sony and Nintendo should really take a look at Microsoft and learn a thing or two from them, because that's how preservation and emulation should be done. So Delta is, like I mentioned, made by the creator of AltStore. It's got an amazing design. It looks really pretty. With the default themes, both for the GBA and the Nintendo DS, which are the two platforms that I've tested. It looks really beautiful.
It really does. And you can add all sorts of skins to make it look exactly the way you want to.
You can add skins that you can find online to make it look like there are, skins that resemble certain colors of the GBA, or they have like fan-made skins with your favorite video game character on them. Mm-hmm. It's fun. You can use Delta with touch in both portrait and landscape mode. And if you play with touch, again, if your hands aren't killing you, I mean, good for you. But what I like about the touch controls is the haptic feedback.
It is good, but I find it still hard to play with touch because you don't have actual buttons.
Well, yeah, but I'm getting used to it. I think the haptic feedback really helps. And in fact, the touch controls, I want to get back to this in a moment, because it's like it led me down this other path that maybe I finally found the solution here. The other features of Delta that I wanted to mention was like any other emulator. It lets you save and load your video game state at any point during a game, right? You don't have to wait for a checkpoint or a save point. You can save at any time. Obviously, you can still save using the native save feature, and that works because it's an emulator, and those actual save states work. But you can also do the custom save state, and you can pick up a game at any point. It's got iCloud Sync for your games and your game states. And it integrates with files, so you can drop all those games in files, and they work. And and obviously it integrates with external controllers for iPhone and iPad. And this has been my problem for the past 10 days. So obviously the iPhone's big screen is an amazing way to play all the Nintendo games, especially when they are so colorful, or a game like Metroid that has contrast between these dark and gritty areas and the colorful suit of Samus and the monsters and the beam that you shoot from your arm. Like, that contrast between colors, it really pops on an iPhone's display, especially with OLED. It's really beautiful. Here's my issue. Every time I try to play a game at night, just as a way to relax before going to sleep, Sylvia would get incredibly upset at me, rightfully so, because the controller that I was using was very clicky. All the controllers that I was using, they had very clicky buttons, a clicky D-pad or clicky, A, B, X, and Y buttons. So I tested initially with the Backbone controller, which is a really fun portable controller for iPhone that you reviewed, I believe, John, on Mac. Did you do the
I have written about it. I've talked about it and written about it a little bit here and there, but I don't think I actually ever formally reviewed it. Maybe I should. I don't know. But yeah, it's really nice, and that's what I've been using. And I know you haven't, and I didn't. Is it the clickiness or is it the feel of it? Because it makes
it's the clickiness. My problem.
Okay.
My problem is the clickiness.
Yeah, it's very much like a Switch controller, essentially. I was playing in bed the other night, too, and especially when you have headphones in, you have no idea that you're making all these loud clicky noises if there's someone next to you.
Yeah. So that has been my issue for the past couple of weeks, because like every time I was clicking a button, Sylvia was like getting upset at me, and she would wake up. She has very light sleep, and so like and those controllers are very clicky and they make noise. So I was like, okay, so the Backbone controller is not my right solution. So next, I tried the Xbox One and PS4, so the DualShock 4 controllers,
right,
using those mounting clips that you can find on Amazon. They're really cheap, like $10. Those are mounting clips that allow you to put your phone on top of the controller. So you hold the controller and the phone is sort of hovering above it, right? And those were fine. The mounting clips are surprisingly okay, and weight distribution is fine, especially if you're just laying in bed and you're holding the controller on your lap or something. It doesn't really bother
I'm
my wrists.
That's good. I'm surprised. I'm actually surprised at that. That's why I have never bought those. I do have an M5 controller that's like that. It's like the clip is built into the controller though. And that one I didn't like, but I also didn't like that one for other reasons because M5 controllers generally aren't that good.
Yeah. So I tried with this Moga, I think it's called Moga maybe, clip for the Xbox One, but the Xbox One controller was also super clicky. And the DualShock 4 was less clicky, but still somewhat, noisy. I think I found my ideal solution, however.
What?
The DualSense controller for PS5.
Really?
Yeah, it's surprisingly quiet. So I've been looking into I've been really going down this rabbit hole of looking I've been reading about sound dampening options for controllers, which involve opening up the controller and sticking a silicone pad under the buttons, which I really don't want to do.
I had no idea that was something you could do.
Oh yeah, a lot of people have my same problem with a partner sleeping next to them, and the partner is very sensitive to clicky buttons.
Somebody should make a quiet, a stealth
somebody
controller.
Really should, right? I've been meaning to tweet about this. Someone should really make the opposite of a clicky controller.
Right, for this very reason. They do it with keyboards, right? I mean, we know from talking to Mike about it.
A controller for people who have a partner sleeping next to them and they want to play at night without making any sound. Why is this not a thing? Anyway, the DualSense appears to be the most quiet solution of the bunch. I have found this incredible mounting clip, this is an Amazon Italy link. I'm pretty sure this is also available in the US if you look, John. This is called the Awarti. I don't know. It's one of those brands from Amazon, right?
Yeah, made up words.
Yeah, it's I'm sure you will find a version of this in the US. But essentially, this is like a mounting clip that is like a clasp at the top where you put your phone in, and that thing can rotate. So it lets you adjust your viewing angle, so you can tilt it back and forth, but you can also rotate it in landscape and portrait, which makes this one a really ideal solution for landscape games, but also portrait games, such as some puzzle games that you might find on Apple Arcade, for example.
Right.
And I've been playing Metroid with the DualSense and this mounting clip, and it's really fun. It's really fine. The DualSense is quiet. The buttons click, right? And they make a sound. It's just not a very clicky sound like the Xbox controller. One last thing. I also received a Game Vice for iPad mini, which I never had before. So this is the controller that kind of turns your iPad mini into a kind of Nintendo Switch. I haven't tried this yet because my iPad mini is not set up for AltStore at the moment, but I'm going to, and I will report back soon.
Yeah, I'd like to hear what you think. I kind of like it. I mean, I actually got my Game Vice for the iPad mini shortly before I gave up my iPad mini to Jennifer. So it never got a lot of use, and she's not a gamer, so she doesn't use it. It's just sitting in a box somewhere at this point. You know, I actually ordered that OtterBox MagSafe clip the other day because I got to thinking about how that would...
Oh, that's not available in Europe. I looked.
I
really wanted... No, well, when it was announced,
bad.
I looked and it wasn't. But now I'm going to look again.
Yeah, I just ordered that. I think it's $40 in the US. So I just ordered, which is a lot more than some of these clips that you've been talking about, because I think some of those are as cheap as like $15. But yeah, I ordered that because it seemed like a great solution for, clipping your phone to a controller. I have no idea whether it's going to be, how well it'll work, but maybe I can report back next week. I haven't, I've got a controller problem. I own a lot of controllers, but the one I don't have is I don't have the one for the PS5. I don't have that. I don't have the DualSense controller because I don't have a PS5, and I have actually thought about getting the controller just for this sort of thing. It's interesting to hear that it's quieter because that actually might be something that I'd like to have too. But I've got an Xbox and a PS4 controller that I could use. So I don't know. We'll have to see how it goes. Do you know if the OtterBox works with the PS5 controller? I think it does.
I think so.
I know it works with the Xbox and the PS4 controllers because that's what I was thinking of using. I'm going to have to take a look. Mine's supposed to come, I think, on Monday.
Okay. Yeah, it doesn't look like it's available in Europe at the moment, which is too bad because
That is too bad.
If I can get it MagSafe, I'm gonna get it. Like the MagSafe version of anything, I'm up for it.
Yeah, right now I think the OtterBox, I could only find it on OtterBox's online store. It wasn't on Amazon or any like other retailers. So that's it's probably pretty limited availability for the time being.
All right. So to sum up AltStore, you should probably check it out if you're interested in emulation, right? Whether it's a console emulation or PC emulation. There's this really popular PC emulator called UTM that lets you use old versions of Windows on your iPhone and iPad, which is incredible.
Great.
But really the main reason is old video games. And I would say if you're interested in this, look into Delta, which is made by the creator of AltStore. Look into Provenance, which is now an official source on AltStore, and look into what's it called again? PPS SPP, which is a PSP emulator. That's the place to start, I think. And look into your favorite controller solution. And my recommendation would be, go read up on the AltStore documentation. They have a really well done FAQ on the website. But consider, just to be safe, setting up a separate developer account just for this. I literally called mine Tichy AltStore or something like that. And that's my, it's my separate account with two-factor authentication. You can use it. And then you can choose, do I want to refresh apps on my computer every 7 days? Then you can get a free account. Do I want to have a longer limit? And do I want to refresh them after 365 days? Then consider having a separate developer membership with Apple just for AltStore. I keep it separate from my main one. I don't know. Maybe because one day Apple gets upset at AltStore and I don't know. Just to
invalidates all those developers.
Exactly. Just to feel safe, I set it up as a separate thing.
Right. No, that's understandable. Yeah, I've enjoyed using it a lot too. I mean, I dip in and out a lot, as I say. I do use old hardware, I think, more than you. It doesn't bother my hands as much, though I do really love the beautiful screen on the iPhone for some of these games, because you're right. They just really pop on that screen compared to, sometimes some of these games I'm playing, the best thing I have to play them on is an old Game Boy SP, which is a good screen, but it's certainly not a 2021 screen by any stretch of the imagination. All right, Federico, that's it for today. Everybody keep an eye out on Mac Stories because, as Federico said at the top of the show, we're going to have some announcements coming very soon. So keep an eye out for those. I want to thank our two sponsors again. That's Memberful and Technology Untangled. You can find Federico on Twitter and Instagram where he's at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHEES. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.